Good morning. Oh, what a morning. I almost didn't know if I was going to make it this morning. Too much partying last night. For those that missed the I forget the name of it now, the party last night, Southeast Game Night that was here at the church building last night, you missed out on a lot of fun. I mean, we were shooting dice and playing cards, and good thing the preacher was there to win, because we had to win it past the pigs, but needless to say, blue team won. Woohoo! Little praise for the blue team. Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. It was good food and good times, and Jim and Nathan did a good job coming up with games. If you guys missed out on it, I suggest you watch for the next one, because it was a lot of fun. And put on your calendars March 30th, because March 30th will be the potluck, and I heard it's going to be just as much fun. Oh, did I hear wrong? I don't know. But you might want to come and check it out just in case. So I heard it's going to be a lot of fun, so the potlucks always are, and we look forward to that. So anyways, make a mental note. There's lots of things happening at Southeast. I had somebody this week say they wanted to get more involved with what was going on. And I said, open your eyes. No, I didn't tell them. There's lots of things going on. If you guys don't know what to get involved with, come see me. I will find something that you can get involved with. Come see Nathan. Come see one of the elders. Better yet, come see one of the elders' wives, or mine or Nathan's wife, because they're probably more responsible. But there's lots of things to get involved with that's going on around here. Make sure you do get involved. I brought something today to remind us of our past, because I think it's good to remember things that we no longer see anymore. So bear with me, but this is to remind us of our past. Uh-oh. Is it on? I got it on. I got it on. Turn it off, then on. So, I did bring my sermon on a tablet too, and I threw that away because there we go. Much better. That's actually what I brought to remind us of our past. How many of you remember that? Yeah. And when you heard that, the first thing you were supposed to do was go run, hide underneath the kitchen table, because Russia was sending its nukes on the way. Right? For the life of me, I could not figure out how my mom's pine wood table was going to protect me from a nuke. I figured this was a plot by my father, who's a cheapskate, to end the family's life. Had he bought an oak table, we surely would have been protected. But he bought a cheap pine one, and so there was no way we were getting protection. And I know, like many of you, I grew up in the city that was number 2 on the hit list, right? Everybody knew number 1 was Washington, D.C. Number 2 was the town you lived in, right? I don't know. We had like this, I always thought it was funny as a kid. We knew about this, and we heard rumors about this, and later on they were semi-confirmed, although the government will never confirm anything, right? But it was semi-confirmed that the military base outside of Yuma held the secondary stockpile for nuclear warheads. I always thought that was interesting. They thought somebody was going to be around to put those on top of missiles. It was the secondary stockpile. Just in case there was somebody left that wanted to equip one after we've nuked the entire Earth, they would be there. So we were always supposed to be up there on the list. I don't know. You know, everybody was number 2 or number 3 or something like that. But yeah, there was always that wonderful sound. And this signal never came at a convenient time, did it? It was always in the middle of cartoons, or in the middle of your favorite TV show, or the news, or something like that. It never came during a presidential address, did it? No. We don't test the signal during that. It was something nobody wants to hear about. And growing up as a kid, I didn't have cable. I had 3 channels, and when the president spoke, we weren't watching TV, because he was on all 3 channels. So yeah, you would get this signal would come across, and it would interrupt, and you'd panic a little bit, and you'd wait to hear that ominous words, right? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. No, don't play it again. Don't play it again. So, no, but we would wait to hear that word. We would wait to hear, this is a test. This is only a test. This is a test of the emergency broadcast system, blah, 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 blah. Because at that point you didn't care, because you knew you weren't having to hide underneath the table anymore. But it was a test. Testing is good. Now, I know, like, I grew up during the school years where they said testing was bad for the children or testing was good. I did fine at tests. To be honest, I'm one of those kids, I test well. My sister, she didn't test so well. She hated tests. But testing is important, because testing is what proves that we know something, or proves that we're ready for something. And this was a test. And I think that's what's happening with Abraham. So if you brought your Bibles, we're going to talk about Abraham today. Open them up to Genesis 22. Genesis 22. Now, here, today, the people that brought their Bibles are going to have an advantage over the electronics people, because you're going to be able to put your finger in on Genesis 22, because we're going to come back to Genesis 22. You electronic guys, I don't know. What do you get? Put a sticky note on there or something? I don't know. Put a bookmark. Yeah, those never worked for me. But anyways, mark chapter 22 in Genesis and flip back to chapter 15. We're going to start in 15, but we're going to get to 22 here in a minute. Genesis chapter 15 is where we're going to start today. In Genesis chapter 15, it says, "After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision. 'Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be great.' But Abram said, 'O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus.' And Abraham said, 'Behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir.' And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. 'This man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir.' And he brought Abram outside, and he said, 'Look towards the heaven, and the number of stars, if you are able to number them.' Then he said to him, 'So shall your offspring be.' And he believed the Lord, and he continued, and he counted it to him as righteousness." God makes a promise to Abraham right here. He says, look towards the heaven and see the number of stars. And if you can count them, if you're able to number these stars, this is the amount of children I'm going to give you. This promise must have seemed absurd to Abraham. I mean, it surely would to me. I would be looking up at the stars going, okay, God, where's the knot? This is not going to happen. I'm an old man, and you're telling me I'm going to have this many children. It's not possible. But that's not the stance that Abraham takes. Abraham takes the stance, and he says, no, I believe you, God. I believe you. I'm going to be faithful, and I believe you. It says in verse 6, "And he believed the Lord and counted it to him as righteousness." Here is a faithful man beyond faith. I mean, he's more faithful than any of us could ever say we could be. And what does God do? God says, I'm going to test him. Yeah, that's what I want to do. I just showed God my faithfulness, and now I want to be tested, right? It's like that age-old thing, don't pray for patience, because you're not going to like what God gives you to learn patience, right? Yeah. But yeah, Abraham says, I'm faithful, and I'm going to be faithful. And God says, well, I'm going to test that. So now, if you put your pencils or your fingers in at 22, flip over to 22, all the people with paper pages win. No. Verse 22 says, after these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, here I am. God said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father, Abraham, my father, he said. Here I am, my son. And Isaac said, behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went both of them together. Abraham knows who the lamb is. Abraham, it's no secret. Abraham knows who the lamb is. Oops, missed that one. Abraham knows the lamb is Isaac. Isaac doesn't know this. I mean, does this seem strange to anybody else? Here, I show my faith to God. He's going to give me as many sons as there are the stars. And I'm really, really old, and he finally gives me Isaac. And I'm thinking, okay, God, maybe I misunderstood what all the stars meant. Maybe you just meant like the bright one or something. And so I got my one, and now you tell me to go kill the one. I'm not walking up the mountain. I'm not taking the trip. I'm doing a double check. How about you? But not Abraham. And even when Isaac points this out, I don't think I could do that to I don't think I'd turn to Barrett and go, yeah, no, God will provide the lamb, son. Knowing full well I'm supposed to kill him. But Abraham is committed. He is full of faith, and he goes forward with it. In verse 9 it says, when they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there, and he laid the wood in order and bound Isaac, his son, and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand, and he took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, and he said, Abraham, Abraham. Now, he didn't say it that way, did he? I think Isaac might have slipped and stabbed Isaac if he said it that way. He said, Abraham, Abraham. Abraham says, here I am. He said, do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God. Realize this isn't the fear that we understand fear to be. This is a fear that represents respect, reverence, and obedience. I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went, and he took the ram, and he offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of the place, the Lord will provide, as it is said to this day. On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Now that had to cause some daddy issues for Isaac, I'm sure. That's another story, that's another sermon. But let's look at Abraham for a second. God tested Abraham here. He put him to the test. Not many of us can say that we've been tested this way. This is really being put to the test. And Abraham passes with flying colors. He passes the test. See, that's how Abraham gets his testimony. That's how Abraham gets his millions and millions of family. His testimony that reigns on and on forever. Without being tested, we don't have a testimony. If we want a testimony to share with other people, this requires that we be tested. So without a test, there is no testimony. Today, I ask you guys, what is your Isaac? What is it that is in your life that God is asking you to sacrifice to Him? What is it He's asked you to put on the altar and give up for Him? What is it that God is testing you with in your life today? What do you find your identity in? That might be your Isaac. Do I find my identity in my job, in my family? What is it that I find my identity in? Is God asking me to sacrifice that? What do you find your security in? What do you find your security in? Do you find your security in money, in things, in family, in friends? Is this maybe what God's asking you to sacrifice? Is this maybe your Isaac? What is your Isaac? We all have been given spiritual gifts from God. Not those kind of gifts, but the other kind of gifts, the spiritual gifts. We've all been given spiritual gifts. But sometimes we get a little confused about how to use them. And I had this conversation with somebody this week, and I thought it was really, really good. We were talking about spiritual gifts. And some people say, well, you have the gift of teaching, or you have the gift of preaching, or you have the gift of this. I don't have those gifts. Wrong. You have all the gifts. You may be stronger at some of them than others, but you are not removed from your responsibility to exercise all the gifts, because the gifts didn't culminate inside of you. They came from God, and He gave them all. So some of us are supposed to be teachers because that's where our strength is, or some of us are supposed to be preachers or leaders for children, other organizers. My wife, God bless her, is an organizer, and that helps me so much. But the list goes on and on and on. There's lots of different spiritual gifts. God did not skip giving any one of you at least a gift as your strength. He gave you all the gifts, but at least one is the strength for you. It's time to use your gifts for God. God-given gifts are a wonderful thing. They're an absolutely wonderful, wonderful thing. But at the same time, it's very dangerous. Ken Nicholson and I were talking about this Thursday and a little bit this morning, although he didn't realize it this morning. When does a gift become dangerous? A spiritual gift becomes dangerous when we begin to look at the gift as the everything. When we look at the gift and we rely on the gift instead of God, the spiritual gift becomes dangerous. Because then we very, very quickly quit praising God for the gift and we turn this into pride. See, anything we don't give back to God as praise, we will turn into pride. And there lies a danger. That in itself, though, is not reason enough to not use those gifts. We must search inside ourselves and find what God is calling us to sacrifice for Him. We have to find our Isaac. What is He trying to test us with today? So ask yourselves today, what is your greatest God-given gift? What is the thing that God has given you the most strength at in life? What are your most significant God-ordained opportunities? Some of us think that opportunities are when the door opens for us. Others of us know that opportunity is when we rush the gates of hell, right? We open the door. I think I've shared the Mossy Bottom story with you guys before, but in brief, I met a guy one time and he said, "You're all a bunch of mossy bottoms. You all sit around and allow moss to grow on your bottoms." And I thought, how absurd. What is he talking about? I live in the desert. He said, you allow moss to grow on your bottoms. You guys see a door and you say, "Dear Lord, if you want me to go through that door and evangelize those people, you open that door for me." He says, I see a door and I say, "Dear Lord, if you don't want me to evangelize those people, make sure you lock that door before I hit it." A little bit of a difference, right? Sometimes we get caught up in waiting for God-ordained opportunities. God has given you opportunities. They're right in front of you. What are they? What God-sized dream has the Holy Spirit conceived in your heart? Every one of us has one of those, and we think, there's no way that'll happen. That might be your Isaac. That might be your Isaac. Joshua Chamberlain was a student of theology and a professor of rhetoric, not a soldier. But when duty called, Chamberlain answered. He climbed the ranks to become colonel of the 20th Maine Volunteer Infantry Regiment, Union Army. On July 2nd, 1863, Chamberlain and his 300-soldier regiment were all that stood between the Confederates and certain defeat at the battle in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. At 2:30 p.m., the 15th and 47th Alabama Infantry Regiments of the Confederate Army charged. But Chamberlain and his men held their ground. Then followed a second, third, fourth, and fifth charge by the Confederates. But the last charge, only 80 Blues stood standing. Only 80 Union soldiers were left in his regiment. Chamberlain himself was knocked down by a bullet that had hit his belt buckle. But the 34-year-old school teacher got right back up. He figured this was his date with destiny. When Sergeant Tozer informed Chamberlain that no reinforcements were coming and his men were down to 1 round of ammunition per soldier, Chamberlain knew he needed to act decisively. Their lookout, a young boy perched high in a tree on a little round top, informed Colonel Chamberlain that the Confederates were forming rank. The rational thing to do at this time, with no ammunition and no reinforcements, would have been to surrender. But Chamberlain, he wasn't worried. And he wasn't wired that way. He made a defining decision that turned the tide of the war and single-handedly saved the Union. In full view of the enemy, Chamberlain climbed onto the barricade of stones, and he gave a command. He pointed his sword and he yelled, "Charge! Charge!" His men immediately fixed bayonets and started running at the Confederate army, which vastly outnumbered them. They caught them off guard by executing a great right wheel, a military tactic. And in what ranked one of the most improbable victories in military history ever, 80 Union soldiers captured 4,000 Confederates in under 5 minutes. Historians believe that if Chamberlain had not charged, the rebels would have gained the high ground. And if the rebels had gained the high ground, there is a good chance they would have won the Battle of Gettysburg. If the rebels had won that battle, the historical consensus is that the Confederates would have won the war. One man's courage saved the day. It saved the war, and it saved the Union in which we live in. Chamberlain passed the test. He passed the test. He saw that God-sized dream and he said, "I don't care, God. Whatever destiny holds for me, it holds for me. But I'm going to be faithful." See, if we do the little things in life like they were big things, then God will do the big things like they're little things. Sacrificing your Isaac means having the courage to never look back and to go all in, all the way, always with God. See, it means that we trust God. We trust in who He is, who He says He is, and who He's promised us He's going to always be. Trust is not a 99% thing. Trust is a 100% thing. It's all or nothing. Maybe for you it's time to declare bankruptcy to God. Maybe it's time to give up and let Him take control. I think it's time for most of us, if not all of us, to do that. I think it's time for us to put our Isaacs on the altar. Then and only then will we see what God can really, really do in our lives. He cannot give back what we don't give up. God cannot give back to us what we don't give up. But if you surrender yourself to Him, God will surely provide the ram in the thicket for you.